Hey guys, it's Ben the Coin Geek at Old Pueblo Coin in Tucson, Arizona. Thanks for joining me today. And for some of you, you may be watching this in the future, like 2027. And if so, what's the future like? Okay, and if not, if you're watching this in kind of concurrent times, then I have to tell you that I will not be at the Baltimore show in November of 2024. This is a change. I was planning on being there, but with regrets, I will not be able to make it to Baltimore. I'm very sorry. I hope to see you all again soon in the Baltimore area. Now, on to a very fun topic here. Richard asking, like in the 1890s, not the 1990s. I remember the 1990s when bills and gold coins circulated freely. Did stores have a preference if you went to the local carpenter and you bought a dining room table? Were you more likely to pay with a $5 gold piece or $5 bill? Were you more likely to carry one or the other? All right, so let's talk a little bit about the history of carrying gold or silver or coins or paper money in America, because that's really, I think, the bigger question here. And I'll try to get a little bit more to the narrow question that he's asking about, specifically in the 1890s. I don't know exactly, but let's go back at least 100 years before that. The 1790s, let's go a little back farther, back a little further than that. Let's go to the colonial time period when a lot of the coinage that you saw circulating was going to be from foreign countries because obviously America didn't exist yet. So you saw the Mexican 8 reals, you saw a lot of the Dutch lion dollar, and you saw French coins, and of course British coins. All of those things were circulating, Spanish coins as well. All of those coins were circulating in the colonial time period in the colonies. Also, there was paper money, but usually that was kind of more of a promissory note. But at the end of the day, all paper money is a promissory note. So even the earliest form of currency that the Chinese put out was a promissory note. It actually had a picture of the coins and saying this bill, this piece of paper money represents these coins which are actually in the bank. And it was a physical representation, literally with the picture of the coins on it. Right, and so, and that's in lots of ways what we still do is we still have something that represents something else. Now, what that something is has changed over time a little bit, but as we move forward into the post-colonial times, you get into the 1830s, and you ran into some economic hardships in what is known generally as the hard time tokens. This is how we learn numismatically, right? Through coins, we can learn a lot about history. So when you look and see what happened into the 1830s, you had a lot of banks and a lot of private issue tokens, but there was not a federal banking system, right? There wasn't one bank kind of ruling over them all, so to speak. And so you saw lots of banks that went belly up, and at the same time, it was hard for people to have even specie, that is gold or silver coins or copper coins. And so these tokens were made oftentimes satirically to make fun of the politicians and their ideas about how the economy works. Who would do that? And, but these would circulate freely in the area, and lots of them were 1 cent in size or sometimes half cent, but 1 cent in size, and they kind of circulated as currency, so to speak. But you have to realize that the majority of what the U.S. had into that time period up until the Civil War was in some way or another barter. And actually even after that, because we lived so differently, we didn't have a centralized much of anything, right? So once you get into the Civil War, you actually for the first time have a centralized governmental, currency. I'm not counting the colonial currency, the Continental Congress, in the same way as I do the Federal Reserve notes and the United States notes that started coming out during the Civil War. And so during the Civil War, the first banknotes that the federal government issued were called greenbacks. And so a greenback was the nickname because it had a green back. I know, shocking. A lot of the currency that was private issue before that sometimes was uniface or was two-tone or monotone, right? It didn't have any other color spectrums. Some of them did, but a lot of them did not. And so this big, bold greenback was kind of something that was unique enough to where the name caught on and kind of stuck over time. Now, there were shortages of coinage and currency post-Civil War into the 1870s, and that's why you had the introduction of new denominations like the 2 cent, 3 cent silver, 2 cent copper, 3 cent nickel, 3 cent silver, but also why you saw the introduction of postal currency, which was we're going to take actual, postage and turn it into currency. And they expanded into things that didn't look like postage. So they went into what we would call fractional currency. So they had, 3 cent, 5 cent, 10 cent, 15 cent, 25 cent, 50 cent pieces of paper that represented specie, right? All of these things were promises. You'll have specie, right? So what's fascinating to me is one of my favorite little historical points in American history that people don't really talk about, but it's related very directly to gold and silver and paper money, is that coming out of the Civil War into the 1870s, you actually had a political party form called the Greenback. So the original Green Party was actually a currency-based party. And believe it or not, it was the farmers who wanted paper money instead of gold and silver. The banks wanted gold and silver. The farmers wanted paper money. So that's like a 180 from today's spirit, where today's spirit is, well, banks are all arbitraged on nothing, and there's no gold or silver. And then you got the people that push gold and silver. They're like, we need hard currency. We need gold and silver, right? And that's like the common man position is like, we need gold and silver. So, but that is a 180 from 150 years ago, where you actually had a political party that said, no, give us more paper money, right? Instead of give us more currency. And so here's the thing, the paper money always represented something else. Right. And so when you think about the westward expansion, and westward expansion had a whole lot to do with gold and silver, right? Like we have a mint in Carson City because of the Comstock load. We have a mint in San Francisco because of the 49ers, right? So that's a little bit before Civil War, but really once you get post-Civil War, it starts to pick up a lot more. And so local taverns, obviously, they wanted their pinch of gold dust. They wanted gold. Gold was an asset that everybody wanted. So was silver, that had the ability for a common man to have something you could trade. But the common man would trade things anyways, right? So if outside of gold or silver and paper money, so if you lived in a very rural area, all you had was barter and trade. And so your barter and trade system is varied. Obviously, Farmer John could go to Farmer Jane, however that works, right? See spot run. You could go ahead and trade some goats for some sheep, or you made milk and they made wool, and you could do some trade. You would also have the company store. The company store is something completely different. You would have a rural store that would have a huge book, and he would keep track in that book of if you traded your cotton in, that you had so much credit for cotton that you could trade towards other goods that he had there. So you had entire commerces that would trade without any currency. And what's interesting to me is this is just kind of how I visualize this, and maybe y'all think this is nuts, but I actually consider that to be closer to what we have today, is what they had in rural America back in the 1870s, 60s, 70s, 1880s. Because today we have these things like, what is money, right? Well, like people my age and younger generally don't even use paper money at all. They'll have their Apple Pay, or they'll have their, whatever, Google Assist Pay, or their, everything's on their card, on their phone. It's all very representative of something else. And so all of our work is just represented in these little dots and pixels on a screen with decimal points. It's all just bartered onto a spreadsheet, onto a document in a way. So like we don't even usually see physical money anymore. And so in a way, it's like they used to have in the stores, where you didn't actually physically have something, you were just keeping track of something with another list. But this list that we have today is just a number on a line in a bank somewhere. It's all very ethereal at this point, right? So I know this is not actually the question that was asked, but it's where the question led me to. Because if you think about it, today, would people rather have gold or silver, or paper money, or goods or services? And what you find out is that, like, when they do those little man on the street things where you offer someone a 10-ounce silver bar, or you offer them a pizza, they'd be like, I'll take the pizza. Like, there's a lot of nuance that obviously that's a little bit of a gotcha thing, but you understand the point is, would someone rather have the $5 gold piece or $5 bill back in the day? Well, I think they would take whichever they could get. In other words, in the 1890s, they may have been taking trade. They may have been saying, hey, thank you for your local carpentry work. You're the carpenter, the smithy, and I've got some iron work, and we're just going to work together and trade some stuff out. And that was a very common thing. I will say that I think generally knowing what I know about how much people moved all the way across the country to chase down gold, that I think people rather would have had good gold than a $5 bill. So to answer the actual question, I think that especially during that time period, people would rather have coin than currency. Currency was oftentimes not seen as trustworthy. But eventually that all changes, right? So eventually, there's a point at which Diners Club invents the first credit card, and no one takes credit cards really besides a few places. And now you can't leave home without it. Right now, it's just like how people view the world as a necessity. Some people view it that way. Actually, most people do. Some of us are weird, that's all. So, but over time, all these things transition. So I talk about us transitioning very naturally to a cashless society. I don't think there's anything nefarious about it. I just think when you look and say, okay, well, I have an entire generation of people who don't use paper money. So what? Like the generation before them didn't use, 2 generations before them didn't use credit cards, right? And I'm not arguing one way or the other on this stuff. I'm just saying that I think it's very natural over time to see people just start to accept whatever is needed and used in an economic system for trade. If we don't need paper money to trade because we can just text someone, here's a Cash App, here's a Venmo. Like I trade rides with people for my kids and like, oh, here, I'll Venmo you, you Venmo me. Like, it just is how the world works today. So anyways, I took your question, Richard, and totally butchered it into something completely different. Go with the gold piece, my good sir, and everybody else pay cash. All right, thanks so much for being here. I'm Ben the Coin Geek. You can subscribe by clicking on the owl button in the corner and watch more videos on the right side of the screen. Thanks.